bricks on the screen, healthcare in between. Physics, art, and math got us down this path. Historical tales come alive, where science and stories dive. Blended facts with heart, knowledge from the start. Need bridge blues we sing to the future memory. Health and science in the mix. Need got the fix. Complex subjects make
right
clear
now
every episode
in ways that we actually acquire
leads the way.
and ways that make me more efficient.
In the world of digital streams, turning knowledge into dreams. Through the tales of old, new stories unfold.
Thank you so much for joining with me. It is truly an honor and a privilege.
MedBix Webcast is a new kind of healthcare media channel to break the silo mentality and foster interdisciplinary thinking. Our mission is to fill that gap and to create a curiosity through different lenses, tapping the passion that guided the historical figures in medicine and bringing present-day groundbreaking research to the front lines. We interview physicians and leaders in the industry about present-day healthcare challenges on our live podcast.
Hey, welcome to the MedBix Webcast. This is Raman Annam Raju. I'm the host, with the accent, So I have a very distinguished guest today. He's joining from San Diego, right in California, right here. But before that, I just want to mention a little bit about the podcast. This is I've been very passionate about this podcast, and I interview a lot of doctors on this podcast. This is for the doctors watching other doctors, what their journey is from the beginning to this point. That is a focus of the podcast. But anyway, I'm going to bring Dr. Mark Mofid. He is a plastic surgeon, reconstructive plastic surgeon, world-renowned surgeon. He went to Harvard. Then after that, Johns Hopkins. Then he moved to he is now clinical assistant professor in Johns Hopkins University, one of the prestigious Ivy League schools. So he is coming from San Diego, actually. And then he joined in the entrepreneur, Silicon Valley disease. He got it now. It is entrepreneurship. He is involved in a new company called SYLKE. SYLKE wound care is one of them. We really obvious in front of us, and we don't really realize it. For example, SYLKE is used in China and India for a long time as a wound dressing. So wound care is one of his passions. We're going to talk with him about that. So like boron, one of the examples is. So these are obvious things. We really not realize how much important in wound care all these things are. Let me bring Dr. Mark Mofid to the stage. Dr. Mofid, welcome to the MedBix Webcast, sir.
Thank you very much, Raman.
It's an honor to have you.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your journey from East Coast to the West Coast all the way. Can you tell us a little bit where you're from originally, or?
Sure. I usually start out these talks. I'm doing presentations at academic centers really all over the United States. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to the University of Pennsylvania and presenting this new concept about SYLKE in wound care to the Department of Orthopedic Surgery at the University of Pennsylvania. And I usually start out these presentations by saying, I'm one of you. I'm exactly like you. And I'm speaking with medical students, with residents, with people that have been in practice for a while, people at academic institutions. But, my background is I grew up in Southern California. I took courses at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, for many years, really from the time I was 12 until I was 18 years old. Every summer and every Saturday, I used to attend classes in physics and calculus and chemistry and what have you at Caltech. And I did my undergraduate degree at Harvard, and I graduated in 1993. I then started medical school at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. I was there for a period of 11 years until 2004. I went into practice in San Diego, primarily in private practice and consulting for medical device companies, specifically in the field of biologics. And also I served as part-time faculty as an associate professor at the University of California, San Diego for about 15 years. And then became very interested in really the really very creative side of what can be done with silk science, and have been working on this project really for about 4.5, 5 years. We've been commercial for a little over a year now, but the genesis of this goes back really to 2013. And I can tell you a little bit about that story. But just the last year, since the commercial launch of SYLKE, the company, it's just really been embraced by many different specialties in surgery. I'm incredibly excited to be a part of something that's so rapidly growing. We were looking at, since we've been in practice, since we've been commercial now for a year, at the growth trend of the sales of the product. We're almost at about a 4,000% increase from the day that we launched in terms of sales. We're growing by about 40% month over month. So I meet with surgeons all the time that have problems with wound healing. It's almost a little discussed topic. I'm not sure if there's some embarrassment maybe amongst surgeons. No one really wants to admit that they have problems, specifically wound healing problems. It's such a basic thing. You do a very technologically advanced operation, either a robotic procedure or, in the case of orthopedic surgeons, let's say an arthroplasty. It's an operation that really was never even contemplated 60 years ago, 50 years ago. And at the end of it, we put on a dressing that is an antiquated dressing. In the case of Steri-Strips, that's a 62-year-old technology. In terms of cyanoacrylate technology, that's been around since it's at least been FDA approved since the late 90s in different forms. It's been around since the early 80s. And despite the fact that there have been really bad outcomes with those technologies, we still use them to this day. So you take a very high-tech operation and you put a very low-tech product on it at the end of it, and then you're surprised that the low-tech product doesn't perform. So I think that the general understanding amongst the people, at least that we speak with, is that there's been a real need and we're filling it, and we're interested in continuing to innovate in this space.
That is very surprising. I'm coming from Silicon Valley. The innovations in the wound care is not that much advanced. I was surprised, when I hear about that. SYLKE is, for example, is right in front of us. Everybody knows about SYLKE dressing, but they never use it. So tell us a little bit about SYLKE. Why you're particularly focused on SYLKE? There is a lot of other areas, and also among the SYLKE, why there is kind of a different kind of SYLKE is there, different proteins are there. So tell us a little bit about the special about the SYLKE itself.
Well, silk has been used basically by humankind for about 7,000 years. It was developed as a textile in Eastern Asia, and in what we believe today is China. About 7,000 years ago, it was introduced. It's been used for medicinal purposes for probably between 3,000 and 5,000 years. The ancient Egyptians used it, the Romans used it, and it's been continuously basically used in medicine in different forms for centuries, if not millennia. My interest really goes back to, I'll start with when I started in practice. There was a company for which Johns Hopkins and the University of Maryland, it was a combined plastic surgery training program at the time, where it was a test site for the clinical use of a product called Alloderm. It's an acellular dermal matrix product. It's human cadaveric skin that's been decellularized and used as a graft material. At the time, we were using it for abdominal wall reconstruction. We were using it for breast reconstruction. We were really almost experimenting with it. We were on just the cutting edge of this very, interesting technology that you could take cadaveric human skin, prepare it in a certain way, and then implant it in the body. So I started working on different applications as a consultant for LifeCell in 2004 when I first started in practice. I wrote some papers on the novel use of it for revisionary breast surgery, to use it to treat, for example, capsular contracture with breast implants. And around 2008, I began working on a different type of product called Veritas. It's bovine pericardium, also a graft material used for abdominal wall reconstruction. And I worked with them until they were acquired. Synovus was acquired in 2011 or 2012 by a much larger medical device company called Baxter. Continued to work with them for about a year. And then in 2013, I started working with a company called Allergan. Most people know Allergan because they make breast implants, Botox, fillers like Juvederm. And they're big in the aesthetic space, specifically in plastic surgery. And they had acquired a technology from a company called SYLKE, based in Massachusetts. And it was an implantable silk mesh. And it was basically the poor man's version of acellular dermal matrix. It was basically an inexpensive and easily scalable technology that could be used as an implant in the human body. And that technology has been around for, so at least at this point, about 2 decades. What they did is they found a way to remove the sericin protein and to leave the fibroin core intact. You know, fibroin is a very interesting protein because there's never been a single human being in the history of the world that's been known to have an allergic reaction to silk fibroin. It's bacteriostatic, which means that you can't really grow bacteria, at least not easily on it. And it's hydrophobic, which means it doesn't trap moisture or water. And finally, it's very strong. And so in addition to its excellent biocompatible profile, it's been studied in vitro, and it's been found to actually be excellent and to have, you know, many regenerative capabilities, you know, potentially as wound accelerants, for example. So Allergan acquired this technology around 2013 is when I became involved with them, right at the time of the product launch. From 2013 to 2015, I was very involved with it. There was, unfortunately, an off-label promotion of it. The FDA regulatory program has what's called a 510K system, and it's what allows companies to get authorization from the government to use, well, to promote that product and to make it available for use for an intended purpose. But it was not promoted for the purpose that at least the FDA was concerned it was appropriate for. And so they wound up selling that technology to another company called Sofragen. I did a little bit of work with Sofragen for about a year. And then for a period of 3 years, I started working on this concept of potentially using silk-based science for wound dressings. I had, you know, just like everyone else, every other surgeon in the United States used SteriStrip technology from the early 1990s. When I started in medical school, I was very familiar with it. It's an inelastic paper tape technology, and there are relatively high rates of detachment, blistering. It's not waterproof, for example. So I didn't really like SteriStrips. And when Dermabond was FDA approved in 1998, it was interesting to me as a wound closure product. It's a liquid, obviously, it's a polymer. And there was a lot of interest in using it, not just for lacerations and cuts, which it was FDA approved for, but also to cover surgical incisions. So I was a resident at Johns Hopkins at the time in 1998 when cyanacrylate, 2-octyl cyanacrylate was FDA approved, and butyl cyanacrylate was FDA approved in the mid-1980s, but it didn't really take off because of some side effect profiles that it had. And then Dermabond, which is a wound closure mesh, was introduced approximately between 2012 and 2014 before it was really fully being commercialized. And I was an early adopter. I like the idea. I'm a lazy surgeon, which means that I don't necessarily want to reapply dressings in clinic. It's time intensive. Patients don't like it. It's uncomfortable. I wanted to be able to put a product on a patient, let them take showers, and come back and see me, whether it's a week later or 2 weeks later, and then have it be something that I can easily remove. So in concept, in theory, I liked it. It's a meshed product, which means that you can put it over a joint. At the time, I liked this concept or this idea that it had a certain antimicrobial ability, like a waterproof cap that would seal the incision. So these were all things in theory that made sense to me. But in practice, I was having, again, high rates of skin allergic reactions, wound infections, wound dehiscences, and you know that it just, some things didn't conceptually make sense. You know, you have, for example, an incision that you close. There's a gap in between the interface. It's not a watertight seal. You know, if you put a liquid, it can potentially go into the interstices between the healing skin edges, and it can disrupt wound healing, if anything else. And so I was thinking maybe that's it. So I already had this sort of background and experience and knowledge. I'd written some interesting papers that got published and did some clinical trials using silk-based substrates as an implant in the body. I thought, let's try it on the exterior of the body. So I applied for some, at the time, provisional patents. Those patents have been granted, both in the United States as well as internationally, to use silk-based medicine, to use silk-based meshes external to the body, using different adhesives. And then once the patents were granted, I started working on clinical trials, which we completed. It was a collaborative effort between Johns Hopkins, where I'm now on faculty, and UCSC, where I used to be on faculty. We had a number of surgeons that were participants in this clinical trial, and the results were really overwhelmingly positive. So we rapidly worked to commercialize this over a period of a few years. And here we are now, a year since launch. And, I can tell you that there's just a lot of enthusiasm among surgeons because we've been plagued with this problem. No one wants to talk about it. I'm talking about it. Now other people are, being more open, I think, with their own complications and how bad their outcomes were using cyanacrylate technology. So we consider this to be a disruptive and transformative product. It's not a Me Too product. There's nothing else like it. At least there won't be for the next almost 2 decades while those patents are still in effect. And we really hope to supplant the entire cyanacrylate market with a skin-friendly adhesive with a biologically, compatible and non-immunogenic substrate, which we believe is silk fibroin.
Dr. Mofid, you see a direct advantage over copper or boron or other ones, the other areas. So you see a clear advantage on the silk side of the protein. You see that overwhelmingly is high. Tell us a little bit, what is the special advantage over those traditional other methods than this one?
Yeah. So first of all, it's naturally sourced. I like to think of things in sort of different categories. For one, it's always better to use a biologic. It's always safer to use a biologic than to use a synthetic. I'll talk to you a little bit about cyanacrylate, for example, because it's probably the most commonly used wound closure device other than Steri-Strips worldwide. I mean, there's probably millions of patients per year that actually have procedures done with just those two. But as far as sort of safety profile goes, a lot of the synthetics have problems associated with them. Either the product itself will cause an allergic or an irritant contact dermatitis, or basically the degradation products of those will cause an allergic or irritant contact dermatitis. Silk doesn't have that problem. People have put silk clothing on their bodies for 7,000 years. And it's very rare to find someone who's allergic to Saracen. Now that we just have purified this product and it's just down to the fibroin core, I don't think there's ever been a single report in the world medical literature. If there has been, I'm not aware of it. And I think I probably know that literature as well as anyone else. And so there's never been any reports of anyone that's been allergic to it. And so that's what I was looking for, something that had a great profile associated with it, that was waterproof, that was meshed so that it could contour over irregular surfaces and joints, something that people could shower with, something that people could leave on for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks without problems, and something that when they removed it wouldn't remove the top layer of the skin. There's other good adhesives on the market, but many of them are too strong. Some of these hydrocolloid dressings, you remove them from the body and you basically remove the top layer of the skin. The way I sort of thought about it is, I want to be able to remove a dressing off the body the way I remove a Post-it note off the refrigerator. The only difference is I want it to be stronger and I want it to be waterproof. And that technology is around, So I just basically utilized existing technology to create a better product that filled a void, that I think we all have as surgeons.
You wrote a little bit about the adhesive injuries, medically induced adhesive injuries, the cost of it, the wound care cost. Can you give us a little bit of the numbers on that one? The wastage and the cost and all those things in the adhesive injuries?
Yeah, it's in the billions, is all I can tell you, is that, we do between 10 and 12 million operations per year in the United States, huge numbers of operations. If you look at around the world, I mean, I'll just go to Europe, for example, they probably have an equal number of surgeries. About 1 out of every 8 patients that has surgery will have some sort of a skin reaction or a problem associated with that dressing or wound closure device. It could be a blister, it could be an allergic skin reaction, it could be removing the top layer of the skin when you remove the dressing. It could be a surgical site infection that's probably related to the dressing that was used. And those numbers are big because the average hospitalization for a surgical site infection is about a $20,000 problem. There's certain operations that we do, like arthroplasties. If you have a patient with a total hip joint and that gets infected, that's like a $350,000 cost to the healthcare system. And you have changed the trajectory of that patient's life forever. That patient could die. They could wind up going to a certain skilled nursing facility. They may never be able to walk again. So some of these, even though the cost of the healthcare system might only be $350,000 or $400,000, the cost to society is enormous.
Absolutely.
And 2% of joints get infected. It's why I just saw a study that was published from Columbia. It was looking at two different cyanoacrylate polyester mesh adhesives. There was something like a 3.6% infection rate with the Dermabond product, and it was over a 7%. I think it was like a 7.6% infection rate associated with the Medtronic Liquiband product. I mean, that's a nightmare. I mean, it's a nightmare for the patient for sure. It's a nightmare for the surgeon who has to care for that patient, and it's just not a good way for society to spend its resources. The difference between, an $80 wound dressing and really a catastrophe for that patient. The average sales price of our product, for healthcare systems is right around, I think it's like between $80 and $120. That's money well spent. Any hospital system that tells you that has not had to take care of a patient, that's experienced one of these really catastrophic and avoidable problems.
The cost is underreported in the wound care. That's definitely true.
I'll tell you this: no surgeon wants to publish their bad results. If you're a healthcare system and you have a high infection rate, the last thing that you want to do is have your surgeons publish how bad your infection rate is, because you're going to scare patients away. You're going to scare referring doctors away. Yeah, so it's a very bold thing for institutions to publish their bad results, but that's how we make medicine better. Mm-hmm. And so I think it like I said, it's I wasn't necessarily one of those surgeons that wanted to tell people either how bad my outcomes were with cyanoacrylate technology. And now that we have a better product, I want to tell the world about it. Back then, I don't think I wanted everyone to know that. Every 3 patients of mine had allergic skin reactions, or 1 out of every 2 had to either go on, which is what we found in our clinical trial. 1 out of every 2 patients either had to go on a steroid or an antibiotic because of an allergic skin reaction using the Johnson & Johnson Ethicon Dermabond wound closure system. But that's what our data showed. And there's other now major institutions, Harvard Medical School, Boston Children's Hospital, published their data on in pediatric orthopedic surgery, showing that 25% of kids had allergic skin reactions that had been previously exposed to Dermabond. There's a paper in the plastic and reconstructive surgery literature showing that 15% of first-time exposed patients for all breast procedures had allergic skin reactions to Dermabond technology. So anyhow, I'm happy to tell you where I am now, because I wasn't happy with my outcomes a decade ago.
Yeah. That's an industry problem in general. Plastic Reconstructive Surgery Journal, Dr. Daniel Rouhani gave a ringing endorsement for the SYLKE protein, because he was saying that in the topical, the adhesive, I think SYLKE is going to be randomized trial. It became very. Tell us a little bit about that, Dr. Mark.
Oh, that paper is contemporary. It's actually published this month in the prestigious Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery Journal. I think that it's the very first paper ever selected by that journal to have an associated video with it. Hopefully, that'll be something that's done in perpetuity. But Daniel Rouhani's paper, I think, is seminal. It demonstrates the clear superiority of silk-based technology over Steri-Strip technology, which again has been around since 1962. I typically tell patients, first of all, I wasn't born in 1962. I was born a little bit later than that, not too much later than that. But I can tell you that there is nothing that I do today that has not advanced technologically since 1962. From the car that I drive, to the phones that I talk on, to the instruments that I handle in the operating room, to the sutures, everything. The computer that I'm on right now didn't exist in 1962, but we still use this antiquated, really bad technology today, and it's the standard of care in medicine, and no one understands why. If you were to ask the average surgeon why they still use Steri-strips today, despite the fact that it has all these problems, one of the things that came out of Daniel Rouhani's paper was that 85% of the time, Steri-strip technology fails. 10% of the time, patients get blisters. 75% of the time, it falls off within the first 2 weeks, which I think is premature. So it's a technology that fails 85% of the time, and it's still the standard of care today. Makes no sense.
So Vicky Fishneck, she's a friend. She educated me on this wound care quite a bit. She's a nurse. She is a wound care special, nurse in the wound care special. She knows a lot more about. She educated me quite a bit on the wound care. I have no idea before. All these obvious things and the cost of the wound care. It is really, I learned from quite a bit from her. So Vicky, can you ask any questions? Probably you're in the same industry. You may know a lot more than I do. So,
well, I mean, I agree with the doctor on this, Mofid, Dr. Mofid. I still see. I'm a nurse practitioner, but I'm in industry. But the dressings that the surgeons historically choose, like Xeroform and Neosporin, is just like why? Why?
Why? I've been asked to submit an invited paper on any topic of my choosing, which I'll tell you right now, I'm working on a paper with some of the leaders, the thought leaders in the field of plastic surgery, on specifically how to close a surgical wound, to standardize it, how to close a surgical wound, and how to take care of it after surgery. It's a very basic thing, but it's completely not standardized. And you might have surgeons, like you said, applying Neosporin, for which there's absolutely no data. You have surgeons that, we do all sorts of things that I would consider to be witchcraft in medicine. And half the things that we put on patients after surgery have really no proven benefit. And I'll just take this opportunity to say this one thing. So the FDA approved cyanacrylate technology for wound closure in 1998. It's like 27 years ago. The data that was submitted with the 510K showed that if you use Dermabond as opposed to a control where no Dermabond was used to close a laceration, that the likelihood that that patient was going to get an infection, and this was the combined was, I think it was about 460 patients. The likelihood of getting an infection went up from 0.9% to 3.6%, which is to say that the FDA knew, a panel of 8 judges knew in 1998 that applying cyanacrylate or superglue to a wound increased the risk of infection by 400%. And despite that, they approved it. A panel of 8 judges approved it. They put in language that suggested that they completely understood the problem. They just said that it would be figured out in a post-market analysis or phase 4 clinical trial, which was never done. And somehow, other than Steri-strips, what's become the standard of care, something that we've known for 27 years, increases your risk of infection by 400%. Like, why did they approve it? I have no idea. Still to this day, I have no idea. And every clinical trial that's come out in the last 5 years shows these horrific infection rates, not to mention, skin allergic reaction rates that in many cases have to be treated with steroids for long periods of time, sometimes in some cases oral steroids too. Like, there is no benefit. And the other thing that's been known really for the last 40 years is that cyanacrylate, which is probably the most common, either the number 1 or the number 2 most common wound closure it's used in the United States today, that it degrades into formaldehyde. So it undergoes a degradation hydrolysis reaction, and it degrades into relatively high rates of formaldehyde. We've actually tested the product, and we found extremely high rates of formaldehyde that's been released, and I think that's one of the reasons patients get so sick from it. The other thing is that if that wasn't bad enough, the Prineo Dermabond wound closure device, which we tested in our first study that we published in October of 2023, they put a salt catalyst in it, and it's called benzalkonium chloride, and it accelerates that exothermic reaction from 2-octyl acrylate in its liquid form into a solid form, so that a surgeon can get out of the operating room in a minute or two as opposed to 10 minutes. And it basically accelerates that conversion into very high rates of formaldehyde. So why that product is on the market, I don't know. And I think part of it, that's the reason that it's such an easy sort of decision for surgeons to make, and I think for hospital administrators at this point to make, is that they're trying to move away from that technology. But it's just something that should have never really even come to market.
I talked
Just
with my
looking,
friends in
one more
Silicon-
question.
Yeah.
Just looking at the material of your product, I mean, we spent some time with a major hospital trying to figure out what they could replace Xeroform for their donor sites. Your material just seems like that would be ideal.
You're talking about skin graft donor sites.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think that really, I think at the very beginning of the podcast, I was telling Ramana that I think that there's a lot of innovation potential. We're just on the cusp of this. This product that's been around for 7,000 years, that was used in, ancient cultures, from the Romans to the Egyptians to the Indians to the Chinese. We're just on the very tip of this iceberg. I think that a fibroin powder can be used over skin graft donor sites. I think that using this product specifically over a skin graft donor site, as opposed to much more expensive animal-derived biologics, for example, the Kerecis product that's you've probably heard of.
Yep. I'm familiar with it.
Now I put that on my skin graft donor sites. Do you know what the cost of that is for each? It's $4,500 for accelerated wound healing on a skin graft donor site. I think that with silk-based technology, you could do it for maybe $100 to $200. The cost of manufacture would be less than $100, and so it doesn't make sense.
Have you tested just by looking at it? It almost looks silicone. I would think that the healing for that area would just have a finer, or just free of the mesh lines, and
A lot of people don't think of insects as animals, but they're animals. So this is an animal-derived bioprotein, and it's used as a wound accelerant. There's other wound accelerants that are used. For example, the Integra A-Cell product I use that in my own practice. It's $1,600 for a 1 gram vial to put on traumatic. I use it on traumatic upper extremity wounds. I think that a similar insect-derived animal bioprotein, for which there's a lot of data now. We haven't done it in human clinical trials yet, but the likelihood that you could replace a $1,600 animal-derived bioprotein powder with a $50 powder is very good. I think that you can replace a skin graft donor site that costs $4,500 with one that maybe costs $100. So I think that there's a lot of innovation potential here. And I think
there is. I can tell by looking at the material that this could do a lot more. I mean, some of my sites.
Vicky was mentioning about CTP, sub-CTP codes. So there is a lot of reimbursement problems. Can you tell us a little bit about the reimbursement challenges?
Well,
this is
it's a great opportunity right now
a lot of
for
revisions
this particular type of product, because of the CTPs. They had a lot of fraud abuse. The CMS got serious, and despite the Alliance of Wound Care stakeholders really battling to try that, they have weeded it down to 17 products on the approved list for February 12th, 2025. There will only be 17 products. There's only so many for DFUs and only for so many for VLUs. Of course, that's not speaking of the surgical. You guys in surgery will just, but if you're looking at the CTP, skin sub reimbursement for the outpatient wound care settings, that has been drastically reduced, and they're done. They want all these Me Too products out of there.
Is there any abuse, Vicky, in that area? I'm not sure about that.
Yes, there's been a lot of abuse. A lot of people arrested. About 203 people. The DOJ announced it this summer. So, the people, and CMS is looking, and when we were in Orlando and CMS came in, they're basically frustrated. And for the first time in the history to have all 7 MACs get together and put out the same LCD tells you the frustration level and of the abuse of this reimbursement. So a product like this,
I can tell you
Has a
that
lot of potential.
I believe that silk-based technologies and other similar technologies, again, less expensive animal-derived bioproteins,
Mhm.
Are going to save the healthcare system tremendous amounts of money and give you improved outcomes, which is what you want. One thing that I haven't really mentioned yet is that you look at the typical patient with a sub 2 centimeter laceration that goes to the emergency department. The vast majority of patients that go to an emergency department with a cut, for example, they'll wait in an ER for 4 hours. They'll either meet with a physician or a mid-level practitioner who's going to suture them up. The laceration tray is going to be several $100s. They're going to have a painful injection of a local anesthetic. Then they're going to be sutured up much in the same way people were sutured up 1,000 years ago. That concept of suturing a patient close. I'm a surgeon, that's what I do for a living, but the concept of suturing a patient close is something that I think is I don't know if I want to use the word barbaric, but it's antiquated. Instead, you could merely cleanse it with saline or an irrigation solution that has some sort of antimicrobial activity, and then you could strap the laceration closed. And that strapping of a laceration closed takes 5 seconds. Suturing a laceration closed can take 20 minutes. And then that same patient that gets sutured has to go back for a wound check, back to the ER. Then they have to go back to their primary medical doctor to have the sutures removed. And then once the sutures are removed, you're basically removing a foreign body that's now transited through the skin, and it's basically an open wound again. Now that patient is at risk of infection. And I think that all of that can be circumvented merely by strapping the laceration closed with a product that can cost less than $100. So I think there's tremendous cost savings that we're capable of. And I've been in this field long enough to know that a lot of the spending in medicine is frankly wasteful. It doesn't really improve outcomes for patients. Some of the technology we have is, again, like cyanacrylate. It's more expensive and it's worse for you than using nothing at all, for example. And I think there's a lot of examples of that I can think of.
I wear a silk tie. That's why I like silk. Silk is a natural product, is a biologic product, as you said. I want to ask you why there is a resistance in the wound care area with the people, resistance or ignorance, or why that is not developed that much as expected. That is a puzzling to me. Both you can answer about that.
I wouldn't say there's any resistance at all. We've been embraced. I just got off I did a Zoom earlier this afternoon with one of the largest health systems in the United States. And all their stakeholders were on this Zoom, and they want to convert their entire hospital system to silk-based technology. It's, like I said, it's one of the largest hospital systems in the United States. I'm comfortable saying, because there's no reason not to say it, but many of the top healthcare systems in the United States have converted now to silk-based technology. So the Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, Cleveland Clinic, UCLA. If you go to Emory, if you go to one of the top healthcare systems in the United States, they're familiar with silk-based technology now.
Dr. Mofid, you are a distinguished doctor. If you can suggest like that, that I think the world has to follow. Not only the United States, the whole world has to follow. I think they need to take a look at this new innovations in the wound care. That is one thing is big time missing. And Vicky always educates me in this kind of area. But I tell you, it's a very surprising for me. It's a very surprise for outsiders from living in Silicon Valley how behind this wound care industry in the innovation side. It is really, so people like you, we need them, and we need more people like Vicky and you, and then to promote this kind of products. And both of you can work together off the podcast. But I think Dr. Mark, I'm going to present a topic on something different. I'm an innovator. I like to bring a lot of interdisciplinary fields, physics, mathematics. You said that you loved physics when you were in Caltech, so that's a good idea. So I'm going to present a hologram. Holography is how they use in medicine. That's what I'm going to talk about it, if you don't mind, for a few minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Ramana. Thank you, Vicky.
It is quite an honor. So when you come back, we can give you your website and all those things. Then I will be very happy to.
All right.
Yeah, let me bring this. That is a Dr. Mark Mofid. He's from Johns Hopkins. A very distinguished professor, and he's a really true innovator in the wound care industry, we need to really pay attention to what he's doing, So I think the world has to follow, that hologram. I'm going to talk about a little bit of holograms. Star Trek, all three of us watching this. Star Trek, there is a called the Doctor, the emergency medical program. In 1995, there was an AI program started in the Star Trek, introduced the AI. They didn't call AI, but artificial intelligence, but it's called the Doctor, the emergency medical program. It's called hologram. Richard Picardo is he was the actor there in the hologram. He's a holographic doctor, hologram doctor. So actually, there is a gentleman, Gene Dolgoff. He is a physicist, he's an engineer, and then he was watching the Star Trek, inspired a lot of people like me and him and everybody, physics people. So he saw the transporting the human beings to other planets, other galaxies. So he thought about it. How can we transport the energy to that way? So he called that is that holographic energy teleportation. He called. It's a wild imagination. What he wants to do is he wants to take the when you do cancer treatment or any other treatment in the radiation, it is always there is a good cells. There's a doctors, there are nurses there. I don't have to tell them that's really damage the other parts of the good cells. So what he wants to do is, as a physicist, he's thinking there is a way. Can we do a way to skip all those good cells and go to the bad cell and kill that cell, cancer cell? That's a wild imagination. It's not easy. Practically, everybody was laughing at the time. But let me tell you something about it. That's what is a hologram does. That's holographic technique is using is talking about. Hologram has a three, in the actually 2020 Whitney Houston tour, holographic tour started in Europe. She went on a special tour on the holographic after she died, Then in Coachella, where Dr. Mofid is close by, that god of rap, Tupac Shakur he was on the hologram appeared. So holograph photo, if you see them, it is actually in the middle, looks like this interference pattern. That's all. You don't see any images. You see dark spots and white spots. That's all you see. That is the holographic image. So what is there were three very distinct properties of the hologram. It's a very bizarre properties. One is that a computer you store 1 and 0s. The 1 and 0s are stored in the computer. In the hologram is a spots, the interference pattern. Basically, dark spots and the bright spots, they do that. That is a holographic picture, actually. So there is second property of the hologram is you take that, you project that 2D image, then it becomes a 3D image. It becomes a 3D image. The 2D image you project into 3D image. Two-dimensional, lower dimension, go to the higher dimension in that sense. But the third property is much more very counterintuitive. You can shine the light on any parts of that picture, photo, holographic plate. It becomes the entire image. You don't have to you don't have to shed the light on the entire plate. You just any part. So the part contains the whole. Every part contains the whole is a very counterintuitive idea in the holography. So holography is a very special. It's actually the holograph. The creation is a little bit complex kind of thing. It's not that, but it's a reference beam, and you do. It's like a wave pattern, crest and troughs. When the crest and meet, there is a bright spot, and the troughs meet where the crest and trough meet. There's the two waves interfere each other in the dark spot and the bright spots are created. That is the reason you see hologram on the right side. That is if you want to see an Apple hologram, you have to take one reference beam, one you send it through a different way, then it becomes a hologram. So I can go through but if you want to do a traditional 2D to 3D reconstruction, hot ultrasound, for example, you do volume rendering algorithm, NVIDIA sells that ClaraViz. There's I don't know, Dr. Mofid could be using in his practice some of the plastic surgery things I didn't know. But some of the volume rendering algorithms, 2D images, it takes a bunch of 2D images and then reconstruct into 3D. But hologram is different. Hologram is 2D to 3D direct. It is actually stereo ultrasound. It can, I saw this one is an amazing inside. I was teaching them, how to operate the kids. The kids came down and they're playing with the heart itself. It is improved spatial perception, enhanced diagnostic accuracy. Is an amazing year. There is the company here in Silicon Valley does this. Is called G Scaler. That's called. They do that. This one. Jane Dolgoff, they just recently got the US patent in 2022. He got approval for this strange energy transportation of, he called it holothermia protocol. Basically, the way he did it, that is a very ingenious method. He's a physicist. He got the 16 DARPA defense, in the defense Department of Defense gave him a contact in the funded this project. Holographic ring he creates. What he does is using the interference pattern and avoiding all the dark spots in the good cells. He put the dark spots, and only the bright spot is concentrated on the cancer cell, the cell that using metal nanoparticles to identify the cancer cells, and then shoot them into the heat. Heat wave. We sense a heat wave and kill them. So it got approval, actually. He got the US patent on it. And Gene Dologoff is still alive. He's 80 years old. The Department of Defense, the DARPA director, said that it's going to change the game of the holography treatment of cancer, treatment of diseases, plaque, and all those things is going to change. But it is still in the process. But it is going to be very interesting. In the universe and brain, there is in 1982, I'm a physicist, and I read a book on the holographic universe. Michael Talbot is from San Francisco. He wrote a book called very interesting book. If you get a chance, read this book. It is an amazing. He died at a very young age. But Michael Talbot wrote in that image, he said that he explained about the holographic images. If you cut the holographic image into two parts, it is not cut into the half and half. It becomes two small parts. If you cut it to small parts, it becomes a smaller and smaller. So every part contains the whole. Only retrieval is the challenge. But every part contains, when you make it smaller and smaller, that means then you can do a new kind of a medicine is coming up, ECO biology, embryo containing information of the whole organism. That is one of the Chinese very interested in this one. Every cell and every cell contains all the information of the entire body. That's what the acupuncture is. Actually, it is a peer-reviewed study. In fact, they found out University of San Francisco, peer-reviewed in the year that they did the pain and the anxiety that they can be reduced. The year represents the entire body. That's very strange. That's what they did in the acupuncture, actually. So they kind of hologram they use in the acupuncture, imagination wise. So the brain is a hologram. One of the things is my favorite physicist, David Bohm, on the right side. The Carl Pribram is the neurosurgeon from Stanford here. He died. Both of them passed away. But they were suggesting the brain as a hologram. The amount of information that is stored, it has to be hologram, because that's what they say, the amount of hologram the amount of the storage that you do require, holograms can accommodate, not any other way. But there's a observer reality, that is another one. But one of the things is the Pribram problem was in the trauma patients that people don't remember when it's a part of the brain is taken out. They don't remember part of the ABCDs. Either they remember everything or they don't remember at all. That is so his argument is that every cell, every neuron has all the information of the entire memory. So it's a classical. I don't know. That is an argument from Carl Pribram, and then they agreed by the David Bohm says that what is physics. He says that one mind, that one mind is a theory of one mind. All the one universal consciousness is the key for all of them. There's only one consciousness that does manifest into different ones. But now Alzheimer's, they're using because certain way our brain works with holograms, very strange. Now they're using the rows, one of the things to cognitive functions, improve the cognitive functions using holograms. That's that's a very now surgery that probably Dr. Mofid may doing that soon, in the radical improvement in the diagnosing and treatment and educating other doctors, effective learning capacity and all those things. Holography can be a great tool in teaching. That's Thank you for watching. These are the companies that do medical holography. That's they do. Deep Perception Real View is really good one. My friend Shana Pandya, she's she's a space doctor. She was working with one company, the holography company there. So universe may be hologram. That's what the Michael Talbot said, that we are in the hologram. We may be part of the simulation. So that is. Thank you for watching. Let me bring that's universe, maybe hologram. We're all the projections of the hologram. That's the end of the story. So that's somehow strangely we're all connected to that. Let me bring to the guest to that. My physics presentation is over. Let me bring Dr. Mofid. Something that I want to present every time we come down the physics. I'm a physics guy. I want to give innovations come through interdisciplinary field. What do you think?
It's all interdisciplinary. I mean, we adopt plastic surgery as a field, for example, owes its origins really to all other specialties in medicine. The very first rhinoplasty that was done by an orthopedic surgeon, Jacques Joseph. Prior to him, it was an ENT. There was someone else who also pioneered the field, and he was an ENT doctor. The peniculectomy or abdominoplasty that we do came from Johns Hopkins, actually, from an OBGYN. So we borrow from one another all the time. The very first kidney transplant that was done in the world wasn't done by a transplant surgeon. It was done by Dr. Murray at Harvard, who won the Nobel Prize for it. It was done by a plastic surgeon. So there's a lot of cross-pollination that I think goes on in medicine. I see that, now that we're commercial, for example, the orthopedic surgeons are talking to the other specialists. The GYNs are learning from the plastic surgeons, or the plastic surgeons are learning from the cardiac surgeons. We all talk to one another, and that's kind of what makes this an interesting field.
Yeah, that's the only way to bring really innovations to the forefront. Vicky, what do you think of that? What is the future of the wound care? You think, Dr. Mofid, what is the one of the adhesive you're talking about? But is there any other areas of the plastic surgery? You can talk about surgery also, plastic surgery. Are there any new innovations coming up there in the plastic surgery side, and or the wound care you were talking about? Any new?
There's a lot of I work with a lot of startups and getting them through foundations and finding the foundations that will provide money that is undiluted, which is always great because we can run them through CRPs. So getting products such as yours through foundations like this opens up the door for CRP or DOD options, and they look at that and they invest in it, and as a because it's for them. And it's it's very interesting what you have here, because I'm working with a startup where we're bringing some products with hemostatics for combat. So your platform here is very interesting. I think you have a lot more growth with this SYLKE than just where you're currently using it.
Here's something else that's interesting, is that fibroin is a natural hemostatic agent.
Yes.
I've contemplated using it in the same way that you might use Arista or one of the other hemostatic agents that you're using. And again, the key about it is that you can manufacture it for, maybe not pennies, but dollars. Yeah. The cost of manufacture is tremendously less. And that also means that you can scale it in a way that you can't scale other technologies. You're probably pretty familiar with negative pressure wound dressing.
Oh, yeah.
It's an unscalable technology. It works, but it's unscalable. You can't put a $500 wound closure device on every cesarean section. There's 1.2 million C-sections done per year in the US. You simply can't do it.
No, it's not affordable.
No, you can put SYLKE on every one of those patients. That adds either nothing. It's either less expensive or essentially the same price as the other wound closure devices. But instead of having a 6% infection rate in C-sections around the country, I'm hopeful that we'll see what we see with class 1 operations in orthopedic and plastic surgery. It'll go down to either 0% or 1%. So that's where I think the real value add is. It's not necessarily to innovate in a way that it becomes untenable technology, not just in the United States, but all around the world, but to innovate in a way that it's something you can duplicate in developing countries just as easily as you can in, the wealthiest cities in America.
Dr. Mofid, not only you're a great surgeon, and then you are bringing the very cost-effective solution for the wound care. You're a true innovator. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Vicky, for joining. And if you want to stay there outside of the broadcast, you can talk together if you stay. But it is truly an honor and privilege, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining.
We are retelling their stories through our patented designs that can be worn on scrubs, t-shirts, printed on conference bags, and endless other promotional materials. Daily Wear for Medicine is the first ever of its kind to create curiosity in medicine through visual art. We at MedBricks are celebrating unsung heroes of the past who made enormous contributions to the field of medicine through our unique campaign called Daily Wear for Medicine. You can wear it, carry it, and give it.